Welcome back to Building What Matters. I'm Tobias Neal. I'm a nonprofit executive, a deconstructing theologian, and a recovery ally. And this is the space where we talk about leading with dignity, living with intention, and building things that actually last. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. There's no framework to it, no lists, no leadership principles to walk away with, at least not in the usual sense. Just a story, a real one, and something that I've been sitting with for a little while that I think a lot of you are going to recognize somewhere in your own life. Last week, I sat in a church that I will never belong to again. And I knew that walking in. In fact, I drove around it a few different times just thinking about that fact. And I felt it in that moment, really, when I pulled into the parking lot. And I want to be a little bit clear about something. That wasn't grief for me, and it definitely wasn't anger. It wasn't some unresolved tension bubbling back up or anything like that. It was just clarity. I was there for a funeral. My first pastor died. The man who baptized me, the man who believed in me before I had any real idea who I was or who I was becoming. I'm going to keep some of the specifics close. It's not just my story to tell, but I'll tell you enough because I think what I want to share and how it's shaped is important. When I first met my pastor, I didn't recognize it at the time, but our journeys were kind of parallel. He stepped into pastoral leadership at the same time that I was stepping into my faith. It was a parallel journey for us, and really, neither of us probably knew it then. And I was his first baptism. I remember how nervous he was. I remember that he had posted some script on the wall across from where we were being baptized so that he could reference that. And it was a nervous excitement, of course. It was the beginning of something special for both of us. And for me, I'm kind of one of those people that throws myself into things. I'm an all or nothing, very passionate person. I always have been. So when I found that faith, I didn't just wade into it. I dove in. I became a youth leader right away. Eventually, I was his first associate pastor. And he didn't just let those things happen. He made those things happen. He made time for me. He made space for me. He always seemed to be available to me. And it wasn't the kind of time that you pencil in between other obligations. It was the kind of time that I spent with him and his family where they became my family, where their home became a second home for me. It was a time I remember so many different long conversations with him about faith, about calling, about life. Stories from his childhood, stories about his father, stories about his experiences in the faith, and just really availing himself to me in the only ways that he really knew how. And usually those happened around the kitchen table late at night with a bowl of popcorn that he would make fresh on the stove. And really, he and his family always had a seat for me. When I started diving into my faith, my pastor recognized some things in me. He recognized a leader in me. He allowed me to become a youth leader. When I shared that I felt like God was calling me to become a pastor, to become a preacher, he started a Bible Institute. He started a pastor's school. He made sure that I was trained the best that he could provide. And when that wasn't enough, he opened up opportunities and helped me find other opportunities with like-minded churches to where I could finish and get my degree from a seminary. And eventually I became his first associate pastor. After I went on to get my degree, I went on to pastor and plant several different churches in different areas. At one point, I genuinely believed that I would spend my entire life inside of that world. And then I didn't. When you leave something that was that formative, that total, you don't just change your mind. Something in you closes a door. And for a long time, every time I got near that world again, something rerouted me. It was like a door that looked open, but it wasn't. And I think I needed that. I know that now. And that the distance for me from those things was protective. I was I was still figuring out who I was outside of all that. And proximity to what I had left, I think would have made that process harder. But here's what I didn't fully realize until last week when I attended that funeral. I was still carrying something I hadn't put down yet. It wasn't anger. It not really. It was a bit of bitterness, like low grade, background noise, the the kind that doesn't really announce itself, but shapes itself inside of you. When I found out that he died, something happened that I wasn't really expecting. That little piece of bitterness that was still there, and not towards him, but towards the whole unraveling, the cost of deconstruction that I had gone through, everything that I had to leave behind to become who I am now. It just went quiet. I didn't have to manage it anymore. I didn't have to suppress it anymore. Sometimes I didn't even know it was there, but it was coming up in certain ways with certain feelings and certain memories, but it was all gone. It had been waiting for permission to leave, and somehow this sounds crazy, but somehow his death gave that to me. And I was able to attend that funeral full. That's the only word that I have for it. I was full of love, full of respect, full of something that felt less like grief and more like remembrance. And not just for him, but for his family, for that community, that version of myself that existed back then. I didn't go back despite everything. I went back because of everything. Walking back into that church was like stepping into a memory that still had a pulse. The songs that we sang, knowing every word of them, the cadence of the whole service, the way people greeted and moved around with each other. All of it was really kind of just familiar in a way that goes past my brain and right straight to my nervous system. Then his oldest son got up to speak. He's a pastor as well. And he looked like him. He sounded like him. He carried himself in very similar ways. And for a second, time just kind of collapsed. And sitting there, I had this moment of clarity. I don't believe what I used to believe. I don't see the world the way that I used to see it. And I couldn't go back to that life if I tried. But that doesn't mean it meant nothing. Here's what I want to say for a minute, because I think this is important for a lot of you who are listening and who tune in for these types of discussions. There's a narrative that runs through the deconstruction spaces out there. And I get it. I've been in those spaces. I've needed those spaces. And the narrative is everything you came from was an illusion, manipulation, harm. Burn it down. Walk away clean from all of it. And sometimes that's the right call, but not always. Sometimes you were loved. Sometimes someone really did see something in you before you saw it in yourself. Sometimes they gave you language for who you were becoming. They gave you confidence. They gave you opportunity, gave you access to rooms that you hadn't earned yet. And you're still using all of that right now, even after everything changed. He wasn't perfect. Hell, neither was I. Still not. And the system that we were a part of had real problems. Things that I've had to unlearn, things that I've had to heal from, ways of thinking that I have had to dismantle piece by piece. But if I look at all of it and I say it was all wrong, I don't just reject the bad. I erase something that was actually real. I erase the fact that someone believed in me early, made space for me before I might have deserved it, help shape the person who is now standing here doing this work, building something new, building something that matters. And I'm not willing to throw that away just to make my current beliefs feel cleaner. Now, here's where this connects to everything that we talk about on this podcast, because this isn't just a deconstruction story. It's a building story. Every builder, every person who's ever started something new goes through some version of this. If you leave something, a system, a structure, a version of yourself, a way of doing things that used to work but don't anymore, and the temptation when you leave is to burn the whole thing down, to say none of it counted, none of it was real, start from zero. Here's what I've learned. In recovery work, in leadership, in my own life, you don't build from nothing. Nobody does. You build from what you've carried forward. And the question isn't whether your past shaped you. It did. The question is whether you've been honest about what in the past is worth carrying forward and what needs to be set down. Some of what you've learned in the thing you left behind is still good material. Some of the people who shaped you in that season gave you some real tools. Some of what you built then is still load-bearing now, even if you've rebuilt things around it. Deconstruction isn't demolition. At its best, it's renovation. You're not tearing down to have nothing. You're tearing down to build something true. I left that funeral with something I didn't know I was still carrying. It wasn't grief, and it wasn't doubt, and it certainly wasn't any kind of crisis. It was gratitude for a season that mattered, for a man who invested in me, for the version of myself that existed back then. That zealous, certain, and maybe a little rigid preacher boy. But I was real. It's one thing I can say for sure. It was real. And for every person in your life, past or present, who believed in you before you had proven anything, don't be so fast to erase them just because you've moved on. Some of us didn't leave because nothing was real. We left because some of it was, and we had to figure out what was worth carrying forward. That's the real work. That's always the work. That's what I've got for you today. If this one hits close, share it with someone who's in the middle of their own deconstruction or their own rebuild. They might need to hear that it's okay to carry something forward. But before I go, 2 things that I want to make sure that you know about. First, I'm forming a leadership cohort. It's free, it's virtual, it's designed specifically for emerging recovery community organization leaders, people who are doing the work on the ground, building something real, and could use a space to think, ask hard questions, share resources, and be able to spend a little time focusing on themselves with other like-minded people to know that they don't have to do this alone. If that's you, or if you know someone who needs that kind of space, I want to hear from you. This is something I've been wanting to build for a while, and it's finally happening. The second thing, building what matters, is coming to YouTube. I'm going to start with the audio. So if you find this show there before the cameras are rolling, that's intentional. The full video episodes are coming, but I want to get the content in front of more people now rather than wait until everything's perfect. Because honestly, waiting until everything is perfect before you build, that's not really our thing here. The links will be in the show notes. All right, that's it for real this time. Stay in the pocket.